Continental Airlines was a major U.S. airline, founded in 1934 and headquartered in Houston, Texas. In May 2010, the airline announced that it would merge with UAL Corporation, the parent company of United Airlines, via a stock swap. Continental's shares were acquired by UAL Corporation. The acquisition was completed in October 2010, at which time the holding company was renamed United Continental Holdings. During the integration period, each airline ran a separate operation under the direction of a combined leadership team, based in Chicago, Illinois. The integration was completed on March 3, 2012. Continental had ownership interests and brand partnerships with several carriers. Continental was a minority owner of ExpressJet Airlines, which operated under the Continental Express trade name but was a separately managed and public company. Chautauqua Airlines also flew under the Continental Express identity, and Cape Air, Colgan Air, CommutAir, and Silver Airways fed Continental's flights under the Continental Connection identity. Continental did not have any ownership interests in these companies. History. Early history. Varney Speed Lines was formed in 1934, operating airmail and passenger services in the American Southwest over a route originating from El Paso and extending through Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and Las Vegas, New Mexico to Pueblo, Company. The airline commenced operations with the Lockheed Vega, a single-engine plane that carried 4 passengers. The airline later flew other Lockheed planes, including the Lockheed Model 9 Orion, the Lockheed Electra Jr., and the Lockheed Lodestar. Following cancellation of all domestic airmail contracts by the Roosevelt administration in 1934, Robert F. Six learned of an opportunity to buy into the Southwest division of Varney Speed Lines, which needed money to handle its newly won Pueblo-El Paso route. Six was introduced to Louis Mueller. Mueller had helped found the Southwest division of Varney in 1934 with Walter T. Varney. As an upshot of all this, Six bought into the airline with $90,000 and became general manager on July 5, 1936. Varney was awarded a 17-cent rate airmail contract between Pueblo and El Paso. It carried passengers as a sideline. The carrier was renamed Continental Airlines on July 8, 1937. Six relocated the airline's headquarters to Denver Union Airport in Denver in October 1937. Six changed the name to Continental, because he wanted the airline name to reflect his desire to have the airline fly all directions throughout the United States. During World War II, Continental's Denver maintenance base converted B-17s, B-29s and P-51s for the United States Army Air Forces. Profits from military transportation and aircraft conversion enabled Continental to contemplate expansion and acquisition of new airliners after the war. Among those were the DC-3, the Convair 240 and the Convair 340. Some DC-3s were acquired as military surplus after World War II. The Convairs were Continental's first pressurized airliners. The airline's early route was El Paso to Denver, with routes being added during the war from Denver and Albuquerque across Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. In 1946, Continental flew Denver to Kansas City, Tulsa, and to Oklahoma City, and from El Paso and Albuquerque to San Antonio. Each route included stops in several of 22 smaller cities. In 1955, Continental merged with Pioneer Airlines, gaining access to 16 more cities in Texas and New Mexico. In August 1953, Continental flew to 35 airports and Pioneer flew to 19, but Continental's network didn't reach beyond Denver, El Paso, Houston and Kansas City until April 1957, when it started Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles, 2 DC-7Bs a day each way. Bob Six petitioned the Civil Aeronautics Board for longer routes to larger cities, hoping to transform the regional into a trunkline like United, TWA, and American. He was discussing with Boeing for Continental to become one of the first to operate the soon-to-be-launched 707. The timing was crucial, since new routes would justify the 707s, and vice versa. 1960s. Continental Airlines had seen a broad expansion of its routes, thanks to a responsive CAB and persistent efforts by Robert F. Six, who frequently referred to his company as the airline that needs to grow. In 1958, Continental introduced turboprop service with the Vickers-Viscount on the new medium-haul routes. The CAB permitted Continental to drop service at many of the smaller cities on the system, enabling the carrier's new aircraft to operate more economically on longer flights. In 1960, Continental had more than triple the passenger miles it had had in 1956. During the late 1950s and early 1960s, Six was the airline industry's leading lower fare advocate. He predicted that increased traffic, not higher fares, was the answer to the airline industry's problems. To amazement from the industry, he introduced the economy fare on the Chicago-Los Angeles route in 1962. He later pioneered a number of other low or discount fares which brought air travel to many who could not have afforded it. One of Continental's early innovations was a system-wide economy excursion fare which cut the standard coach fares by more than 25%. Continental was one of the earliest operators of the Boeing 707, taking delivery of its first of 5 707-124s in spring 1959 and starting Chicago-Los Angeles nonstop on June 8. Having so few jets, Continental needed radical innovations to the 707 maintenance program. It developed the Progressive Maintenance Program, which enabled Continental to fly its 707 fleet 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, achieving greater aircraft utilization than any other jet aircraft operator in the airline industry. 6. Not being satisfied with 707 service, introduced innovations and luxe cuisine on Continental's 707 flights which were described as a nothing short of luxurious by the Los Angeles Times, and a clearly, the finest in the airline industry by the Chicago Tribune. In the early 1960s, Continental added flights from Los Angeles to Houston, both non-stop and 1- and 2-stop flights via Phoenix, Tucson, El Paso, Midland, Odessa, Austin, and San Antonio. In 1963, company headquarters moved from Denver to Los Angeles. Total passenger miles in 1967 were more than 5 times greater than in 1960, but 61% of the 1967 total was on unscheduled flights. During the late 1960s, the company disposed of the last of its turboprop and piston-powered aircraft, one of the first U.S. airlines to do so. Continental replaced the Viscount fleet with DC-9s and added Boeing 727s. The DC-9 and 727 were to become the workhorses of the fleet from the late 1960s. The DC-9s were phased out by the late 1970s. Continental used the 727-200 as the mainstay of its narrow-body fleet until the late 1980s. In 1968, a new livery was launched, orange and gold G8 lines on a white fuselage, and a black Jetstream logo on the iconic golden tails of the airline's aircraft. The slogans adopted in 1968 and used for more than a decade were, "The Airline That Pride Built," and "The Proud Bird with a Golden Tail." 1960s saw international routes awarded to Continental in the Trans-Pacific case, but these were cancelled by the Nixon administration. During the Vietnam War, Continental provided extensive cargo and troop transportation for United States Army and Marine Corps forces to Asian and the Pacific bases. Continental 707-324CS were the most common non-military aircraft transiting Saigon Tan Son Nhat Airport. In 1967, 39% of CO's passenger miles were on scheduled flights. With Continental's experience in Pacific operations, the carrier formed subsidiary Air Micronesia in May 1968, inaugurating island-hopping routes between Yap, Guam, Majuro, Rota, Truk, Pinape and Honolulu. Air Mic, as it was known, initially operated with Boeing 727-100 aircraft with open ocean survival gear, Doppler radar, and a large complement of spare parts. A senior mechanic flew on every Air Mic flight until the late 1970s. Air Micronesia operated a subsidiary Continental Micronesia until 2010. In September 1969, Continental introduced service from Los Angeles to Honolulu Hilo. In 1970, Continental was awarded routes from Seattle and Portland to San Jose, Hollywood Burbank Airport, and Ontario, California all growing airline markets. Non-stop San Francisco to Albuquerque and Dallas flights were added in the same year. In 1963, Continental was forced to hire the first African-American pilot to work for any major carrier in the United States, Marlon D. Green. Although Continental Airlines first denied him a position as a pilot, after a United States Supreme Court decision allowed a Colorado anti-discrimination law to be applied to his case against Continental. Green flew with Continental for 13 years, between 1965 until his retirement in 1978. His employment paved the way for the hiring of minority pilots by all U.S. carriers, an industry milestone which was finally realized in 1977 after Southern Airways and Piedmont Airlines hired their first minority pilots. 1970s, at Six's insistence, Continental was one of the 3 launch airlines for the Boeing 747. On June 26, 1970, Continental became the second carrier to put the 747 into U.S. domestic service. Its upper deck first-class lounge and main deck Polynesian pub won awards worldwide for the most refined cabin interior among all airlines, as did meal services developed by Continental's cordon bleu-trained executive chef, Lucien de Keyser. Continental's 747 services from Chicago and Denver to Los Angeles and Honolulu set the standard for service in the western U.S. When asked by one Denver customer service agent in 1974 why he flew Continental wherever he could, Hollywood legend Henry Fonda remarked, "This operation is class. Strictly class." On June 1, 1972, Continental's wide-body DC-10 service began. Six had insisted that Continental place a large order for DC-10s with manufacturer McDonnell Douglas. This decision again proved prescient, since the publicity associated with Continental's splashy 747 service Chicago-Denver-Los Angeles-Honolulu had stimulated increased market share and increased traffic for all carriers. Denver, Houston and Seattle were growing rapidly in the 1970s. The DC-10s took over most flights between Denver and Chicago, Los Angeles, Houston and Seattle, and between Houston and Los Angeles. During the 1970s Denver was the airline's main hub. The 747s were focused on the Chicago-Los Angeles-Honolulu routes, with one daily round trip through Denver. The DC-10s served large markets. DC-9s and 727s predominated elsewhere and added frequencies on DC-10 routes. Next to Braniff, Continental operated fewer aircraft types during this period than any U.S. trunk line, affording savings in parts, maintenance, and crew training. The DC-10 enabled the airline to capitalize on traffic growth in the West. Continental saw market share grow annually in each DC-10 market through the 1970s, until relative market parity was achieved with United, the principal competitor on most of the DC-10 routes. The same innovations introduced on the 747s appeared on Continental's DC-10s, including the Polynesian pub, but after the 1973 oil crisis more seats were needed and the DC-10 pubs were removed. Continental phased out its 747s in 1978 in favor of the DC-10s. From the late 70s until it merged with Texas International, Continental operated only DC-10s and 727-200s. During the 1960s and 1970s, Continental's reputation resulted from Bob Six's personal penchant for excellence in every service category, and from his efforts to show up the larger trunk airlines whose size Continental didn't match. From 1961 to 1982, Continental was headquartered at the west end of the Los Angeles International Airport on World Way West. The facility included the general offices, system operations control, the central maintenance facility, flight kitchen, and Los Angeles crew bases. In 1974, after years of delays and legal proceedings, Continental started flight between Houston and Miami, and on May 21, 1976, Continental was authorized to operate long-sought routes between San Diego and Denver. President Jimmy Carter and Civil Aeronautics Board Chairman Alfred Kahn had been promoting deregulation of the airline industry, which would dissolve the CAB and for the first time in industry history allow U.S. carriers to determine without government supervision where they would fly, and how much they could charge. Continental began flights from Denver to Miami, Fort Lauderdale and Tampa, St. Petersburg in Florida. That year, President Carter authorized Continental to begin daily round trips between Air Micronesia destination Saipan and Japan, and approved a route for Continental from Los Angeles to Australia via Honolulu, American Samoa, Fiji, New Zealand and Australia. The South Pacific service began May 1, 1979. After the 1978 passage of the Airline Deregulation Act, Continental embarked on a route expansion. October 1978 saw Continental begin flights from the New York area airports to Houston and Denver, and from Denver to Phoenix. That month Continental started DC-10 flights between Los Angeles and Taipei, via Honolulu and Guam. Service between Houston and Washington, D.C., began in January 1979. In June 1979 Continental linked Denver with Washington, D.C., Las Vegas, San Francisco and San Jose and also began Houston-Tampa service. The airline suffered in 1979 when the DC-10 was grounded nationwide. Continental Airlines only operated the DC-10 and the 727 at the time, so flights to Hawaii were cancelled during the grounding. By the time of the Texas Air Corporation acquisition in 1981, Continental's post-deregulation growth had allowed it to penetrate every major U.S. airline market from the hubs in Denver and Houston, and the rapid expansion in the air was answered with large-scale facilities expansions at each of these airports. In Denver, Continental's rapid growth provided the final impetus for the construction of the new Denver International Airport, which would be completed almost 15 years later. While deregulation allowed Continental to expand into new profitable areas, it hurt the company's existing business as consumers were for the first time able to choose lower fares over Continental's better service. In 1978 Continental explored the possibility of a merger with Western Airlines, which held a nearby headquarters and similar fleet. The route systems would have been complementary, with little overlap. Although they both served the western states, Continental had strength in Hawaii, Southern Tier and the Great Plains states. Western strengths were in the California intrastate market, Alaska, Mexico, and the Intermountain West. Both airlines served the Pacific Northwest and Rocky Mountain states, but along different routes from Los Angeles, Denver, San Francisco, Seattle and Phoenix. This merger was not consummated. Unlike some airlines, Continental's expansion after passage of the Airline Deregulation Act seems, in retrospect, to have been appropriate. The markets that were added were almost all profitable, absorbing some of the hits to its existing markets and helping it in difficult times between 1982 and 1994. 1980s, in 1981 Texas Air Corporation, an airline holding company controlled by U.S. aviation entrepreneur Frank Lorenzo, acquired Continental after a contentious battle with Continental's management who were determined to resist Lorenzo. Continental's labor unions also fiercely resisted, fearing what they termed as Lorenzo's deregulation tactics, which they believed implied that he wanted to make Continental a non-union airline. Lorenzo viewed the company as stuck in the pre-deregulation era and in need of serious changes to stay competitive. Continental was experiencing financial challenges both before and after Lorenzo's takeover, and he demanded immediate wage cuts and layoffs to keep the company afloat. During this struggle, Continental Airlines president, A.L. Feldman, committed suicide, on August 9, 1981, in his office. Lorenzo became Continental's new chairman and CEO. On October 31, 1982 Continental merged with Texas International, offering service to 4 continents with a fleet of 112 aircraft. Continental relocated its headquarters to Texas Air's base in Houston, Texas, which resulted in a large expansion of its hub at Houston Intercontinental Airport and extensive new routes to Mexico and the south-central U.S. Airline unions fought Lorenzo and Continental at every step. In the federal courts, they unsuccessfully sued to stop the company's reorganization. they were successful in working to persuade Congress to pass a new bankruptcy law preventing bankrupt companies from terminating contracts as Continental had successfully done. The law was too late to affect Continental and the cost-cutting and changes that had rescued it from liquidation. Frank Lorenzo took Continental into Chapter 11 bankruptcy on September 23, 1983, after unsuccessfully attempting to negotiate a lower pay rate with labor unions. This saved the company from liquidation, but required substantial reorganization, which began immediately. Following bankruptcy, Continental was freed of its contractual obligations and imposed a series of new labor agreements on its union workers, sharply reducing the airline's labor cost at the cost of employee morale. This move made Continental vastly more competitive with the new airline startups then emerging and thriving in the southwestern U.S., but had notable negative impact on employee attitudes and loyalty. By the end of 1984, Continental recorded a $50 a million profit. Pilots went on strike in 1983, but were unsuccessful due to Continental pilots and new hires who crossed the picket line. On April 28, 1985, Continental inaugurated its first scheduled service to Europe with flights from Houston to London Gatwick. Additional service from Newark to London and Paris started after the airline's merger with People Express Airlines in 1987. However, the airline was still facing significant challenges with consistently low reliability rankings and a high level of customer complaints compared with its competitors. In October 1985, Texas Air Corporation made an offer for a Denver-based regional carrier, Frontier Airlines, opening a bidding war with People Express, which was headed by Lorenzo's former TI associate Don Burr. People Express paid a substantial premium for Frontier's high-cost operation. The acquisition, funded by debt, did not seem rational to industry observers from either the route integration or the operating philosophy points of view, but was in the opinion of most industry analysts rather an attempt by Burr to best his former boss, Frank Lorenzo. On August 24, 1986, Frontier filed for bankruptcy and ceased operations. With People Express hemorrhaging cash, Texas Air acquired People Express on September 15, 1986, at the same time gaining Frontier, whose strong network in the Great Plains and Intermountain West reinforced Continental's already formidable Denver hub. Because it had been the largest airline operating in the New York market, the People Express hub at Newark would permit Continental to expand its East Coast services dramatically for the first time in its history. Continental soon became the third-largest airline in the U.S. and the predominant force in the New York, Denver and Houston airline markets. Continental emerged from bankruptcy on June 30, 1986, with improved asset and cash flow positions and a more competitive route structure with routes radiating to every large U.S. city from major hubs at Denver and Houston. Continental also began developing its Midwest hub at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport in 1986, just as United Airlines began to transfer its Cleveland hub operations to Washington Dulles International Airport in Fairfax County, Virginia. On February 1, 1987, People Express, Frontier, New York Air, and several commuter carriers were merged into Continental Airlines to create the third-largest U.S. airline. In so doing, Continental became an even larger player in the northeastern markets. 1987 saw the creation of Continental's One-Pass Frequent Flyer program. And, in 1988 Continental formed its first strategic partnership with SAS. 1990s. In 1990, Frank Lorenzo retired after 18 years at the helm of Texas International and later Texas Air and Continental Airlines, selling the majority of his Jet Capital Corporation to Scandinavian Airlines system. According to William F. Buckley, in his September 17, 1990 article on National Review, the sale to SAS was conditioned on Lorenzo leaving the company. On December 3, 1990, Continental filed for its second bankruptcy, due to Lorenzo dedicating himself almost full-time to Eastern Airlines acquisition and labor relations issues. The 1990 Iraqi invasion of Kuwait and the resultant Gulf War had prompted a dramatic increase in the price of jet fuel, and People Express had been highly leveraged at the time of its merger with Continental, having purchased Frontier Airlines just 2 years before. In addition to Lorenzo embarking on deals which saddled the airline with other carriers' debts, he also began consolidating the different airlines into one system. That resulted in a fleet comprising numerous aircraft types and liveries. In the late 1980s, following a dramatic reduction of service by United Airlines and an unsuccessful attempt by USAir to establish point-to-point service, Continental expanded at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport and established what would become its third-largest system hub. Continental quickly gained nearly all of the gates in the C concourse, and later expanded that concourse to 24 gates in addition to eventually constructing a new Concourse D in 1999. On February 12, 1991, Continental unveiled a new blue and grey livery and the globe logo. This would continue as Continental's identity until it was dissolved in 2012, and was adopted by the post-merger United Airlines. In 1993 Air Canada, Air Partners and Texas Pacific Group, enabled Continental to emerge from bankruptcy by investing $450 million in the airline. In March 1993 the airline cancelled its services to 9 U.S. destinations and 6 non-U.S. destinations, including all 24 weekly services between the United States and Australia and New Zealand in addition to its flights between Guam and Australia, effective October 31 of that year. Under the leadership of former Boeing executive Gordon Bethune, who became president in October 1994, Continental began a successful transformation project. When Bethune took over in 1994 as COO and president of Continental Airlines, the troubled airline had twice faced bankruptcy and was again headed that direction. A search firm hired by Continental's board of directors suggested Bethune, who had recently completed an advanced management course at the Harvard Business School, to salvage the company. Bethune ascended to the role of CEO and was elected chairman of the board of directors in 1996. Continental went from being ranked last in every measurable performance category to winning more J.D. Power and Associates awards for customer satisfaction than any other airline in the world. Businessweek magazine named Bethune one of the top 25 global managers in 1996 and 1997. Under his leadership Continental's stock price rose from $2 to over $50 per share. Fortune named Continental among the 100 best companies to work for in America for 6 consecutive years. In his final year piloting the airline, Fortune magazine ranked Continental 2004's #1 most admired global airline, a title it earned again in 2005, 2006, 2007 and 2008. 1. Bethune released his book, From Worst to First, in 1999 detailing his success at that carrier. While at Continental, Bethune created the Go Forward plan, to fix problems with the airline, which included employee morale, the quality of the product, and the route structure, among others. He and his management team are credited for saving Continental from extinction. Bethune began by ordering new aircraft in an effort to convert to an all-Boeing fleet. After the opening of the new Denver International Airport on February 28, 1995, Continental management decided that the Denver hub, its historic operational base and heart of the system for almost 60 years, would be abruptly reduced to spoke status. This decision centered on cost reductions, since DIA charges and landing fees were substantially higher than those at Stapleton, which DIA had replaced. Between 1993 and 1995, Continental experimented with an airline within an airline by launching CALAT, later renamed Continental Light, which provided all-economy, low-fare, no-frills service between primarily leisure destinations. Continental Light operated with a dedicated fleet of 100 McDonnell Douglas DC-9-30 and Boeing 737-200 aircraft, each repainted with a light livery and stripped of its first-class cabin. This service was based primarily at Continental's existing hub in Cleveland as well as a new hub established in Greensboro, NC. The experiment, which had been developed and launched by Bethune's predecessor, Robert Ferguson, proved unsuccessful and the brand was dissolved in 1995. Continental's short-lived Greensboro hub was dismantled in the process. On March 26, 1996, Continental launched the first phase of his website. During this time period, Continental was the subject of hostile takeover bids submitted by then Delta Airlines and Northwest Airlines. The final deal struck with Northwest, as described by Bethune in his book, allowed Continental to keep its corporate identity, but all major decisions, mergers and alliances, were controlled by means of a golden share owned by Northwest Airlines. Beginning in 1998, Continental again embarked on a program to expand its international operations. In that year it inaugurated services to Ireland and Scotland, and in October 1998 the airline received its first Boeing 777-200ER aircraft, allowing non-stop flights from Newark and Houston to Tokyo, Japan, and from Newark to Tel Aviv, Israel. Continental in the same year launched partnerships with Northwest Airlines, Copa Airlines, Avant Airlines, Trans-Brazil, and Cape Air, and Continental and America West Airlines became the first two U.S. airlines to launch interline electronic ticketing. In 1999, Continental Airlines started service between Newark and Zurich, Switzerland, and from Cleveland to London. The Cleveland to London originally flew from Cleveland Hopkins International to London's Gatwick Airport, but moved in 2009 to London Heathrow. Due to the economic situation, this flight was suspended. In 1998 Continental expanded its FlightContinental.com functionality, including the addition of Web TV and Windows CE functionality and expanding services to Canadian users. 2000s. On March 1, 2001, Continental launched non-stop service from Newark to Hong Kong, operating over the North Circumpolar route. This service was the first non-stop long-haul route for any airline with flying duration exceeding 16 hours. The SARS outbreak in Asia caused service to be suspended until August 1, 2003. The launch in 2001 initiated a brief battle between Continental, United Airlines and Cathay Pacific over rights to non-stop flights between Hong Kong and New York. In 2003 non-stop daily services were started between Newark and Geneva, Switzerland, and between Newark and Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. On September 13, 2004 Continental entered SkyTeam Alliance along with Northwest KLM and CSA. Continental introduced new non-stop services to Oslo, Norway and Edinburgh, Scotland in 2004. In 2005, Continental expanded service from Newark to Beijing after being awarded the China route. During the same year, 5 new European destinations were added: Stockholm in Sweden, Belfast and Bristol in the United Kingdom, and Hamburg and Berlin in Germany. Services were added to Copenhagen, Denmark and Cologne, Germany in 2006, and to Athens, Greece in 2007. Among U.S. airlines, only Delta serves more European destinations than Continental. In 2005 service to Asia was expanded as Continental introduced daily non-stop service between Newark and New Delhi, India. The success of this Newark-New Delhi route presaged establishment of a second gateway in India with the announcement of daily non-stop service to Mumbai. With the establishment of Mumbai service, Continental offers the most non-stop flights by any carrier from the United States to India. By May 2006, the carrier's passenger traffic surpassed that of Northwest Airlines, and Continental became the fourth largest U.S. carrier, the first change in the top 5 passenger and plane month rankings since 2001. The Wall Street Journal reported on December 12, 2007 that Continental was in merger discussions with United Airlines. Of issue would be Continental's golden share held by Northwest Airlines, dating from a stakeholding relationship during the late 1990s, and the divestiture of Continental's Guamanian hub. A deal was not certain or imminent, with the talks being of a preliminary nature. In April 2008, at the height of oil prices, Northwest announced a merger with Delta Airlines. This allowed Continental to buy back the golden share from Northwest Airlines, which it did. Continental then renewed merger talks with United Airlines, but Continental ended the merger talks that same month. In May 2008, Continental Airlines sold its remaining 4.38 million share investment in Panamanian flag carrier Copa for $35.75 a share. netting proceeds of $149.8 million. Continental had been a principal shareholder in Copa. In June 2008, due to national and international economic conditions, Continental cut 3,000 jobs and the CEO and president had reduced salaries for the remainder of the year. The airline also reduced capacity and eliminated 67 mainline aircraft from its fleet by the end of 2009, retiring all of Continental's 737-300s and all but 35 of its 737-500s. Continental also announced that it planned to withdraw from the SkyTeam alliance and would join the Star Alliance in order to cooperate more extensively with United Airlines and other Star Alliance airlines. The new Continental-United relationship has been characterized as a virtual merger in some circles. Continental had maintained its SkyTeam affiliation to be business as usual until the day of withdrawal. Continental had been in discussions with United Airlines earlier in 2008 which might have resulted in a merger of the two carriers, but Continental withdrew from these discussions stating that it intended to continue to operate as presently constituted. In September 2008, Continental announced that it would commence providing seasonal non-stop service between Houston and Rio de Janeiro. The new non-stop flight was timed to provide round-trip flight connections at Continental's Houston hub to more than 160 cities throughout the U.S., Canada, Central America, Europe, and Asia. Continental renewed its lease for around 450,000 square feet in Continental Center. Continental announced that its fourth quarter 2008 net loss widened to $266 a million on costs for pilot retirement and reducing the value of its fuel hedges. In January 2009, Continental became the first commercial carrier to successfully demonstrate the use of sustainable biofuel to power an aircraft in North America. During the demonstration flight, Continental Euro unregistered trademark S test pilots successfully conducted a number of flight maneuvers, and the biofuel met all performance requirements as compared with traditional jet fuel. The biofuel blend included components derived from algae and jatropha plants, both sustainable, second-generation sources that do not impact food crops or water resources or contribute to deforestation. In March 2009, Continental became the first U.S. carrier to inaugurate scheduled service between New York and Shanghai, China, with daily non-stop flights from the Air Euro unregistered trademark S hub at Newark Liberty International Airport. In June 2009, Continental Airlines took delivery of another new Boeing 737-900ER, which was painted with a retro livery to commemorate the Air Euro unregistered trademark S 75th anniversary. The new aircraft Euro unregistered trademark S retro livery, which was originally used on aircraft beginning in 1947 and is called the Blue Skyway, was selected by Continental employees. Continental flew the aircraft to its 3 hubs for anniversary celebration events for employees and retirees. In July 2009, Continental began to offer direct, giving customers the choice of 95 channels of live television programming, more channels than any other carrier. The channel lineup includes CBS, NBC, Fox, USA Network, Discovery Channel, A&E, CNN, ESPN, Animal Planet, The History Channel and many other popular channels. The fee for economy class customers was $6 per flight. Continental also launched virtual expert technology on their website at continental.com, offering customers 24-hour support on the web for all their travel needs. A Euro OELX, a Euro the Air Euro unregistered trademark S virtual expert, interacts with customers to easily and effectively interpret requests and provide accurate answers to travel needs. Continental was the first airline to use this technology. Continental Airlines joined Star Alliance on October 27, 2009, initiated with a closer partnership with United Airlines. Continental Euro unregistered trademark S transition to Star Alliance is a strategic change that will enhance travel options and competition. Continental Euro unregistered trademark S network will have a distinct fit in Star Alliance, with Continental Euro unregistered trademark S New York hub at Newark Liberty International Airport playing a particularly important role for Star Alliance travelers. Continental Airlines began new non-stop service from its Houston hub to Edmonton International Airport beginning November 1, 2009, subject to government approval. The daily flight was the 11th Canadian destination to be served by Continental and the 4th Canadian destination from the Airlinesa Euro-1 registered trademark Houston hub. Continental also started service from its hubs at Houston and Cleveland to Washington Dulles International Airport. Continental Airlines also launched daily non-stop service between its Houston hub at Bush Intercontinental Airport and Frankfurt on November 1, 2009, subject to government approval. Frankfurt is the airline's fourth European city served directly from Houston. The airline had already been operating daily flights to Frankfurt from its New York hub at Newark Liberty International Airport. In December 18, 2009, Continental began new service from its Guam hub in Honolulu to Nadi, Fiji. The service was to be operated by Continental Micronesia, 2010s. On January 1, 2010, Jeff Smisk, former president and COO, became the CEO of Continental Airlines. Continental also planned to start seasonal non-stop service between Portland International Airport and Ted Stevens International Airport, putting Continental in direct competition with former partner Alaska Airlines. This route was scheduled to start on June 10, 2010. On February 16, Continental, along with its wholly owned subsidiary Continental Micronesia, announced that it applied for non-stop flights to Tokyo, Haneda as part of an Open Skies agreement between the U.S. and Japan. Continental planned to begin services to Tokyo Haneda from its New York Newark hub in late October 2010, and Continental Micronesia planned to start service to Haneda Airport from its Guam hub. However, Haneda's slots were awarded to American, Delta, and Hawaiian Airlines instead. Continental Airlines also became the first airline to launch a mobile boarding pass service to London, the Euro-1 registered trademark as Heathrow. The service allowed customers to receive boarding passes electronically on their mobile phones or PDAs. The carrier was the first to offer the service on non-stop flights from the UK to the US. Continental Airlines left the SkyTeam Alliance on October 24, 2009, and joined Star Alliance on October 27, 2009. Merger with United Airlines. In February 2008, UAL Corporation and Continental Airlines began advanced stages of merger talks and were expected to announce their decision in the immediate aftermath of a definitive merger agreement between rival Delta Airlines and Northwest Airlines. The timing of the events was notable because Northwest's golden shares in Continental could be redeemed, freeing Continental to pursue a marriage with United. On April 27, 2008, Continental broke off merger negotiations with United and stated it was going to stand alone. Despite ending merger talks, Continental announced that it will join United in the Star Alliance. United and US Airways were in advanced merger talks in late April 2008, following the announcement that Continental had broken off talks with United. In June 2008, CEOs of both United Airlines and Continental Airlines signed an alliance pact that led to their eventual merger. The alliance was an agreement to link international networks and share technology and passenger perks. This agreement was basically a virtual merger that included many of the benefits of a merger without the actual costs and restructuring involved. The alliance took effect about a year after Delta Airlines and Northwest Airlines completed their merger, as that released Continental from the SkyTeam contract and allowed for the required 9-month notice. Additionally, Continental joined the Star Alliance, as Delta and Northwest merged. United Airlines was reported to be in serious merger discussion with US Airways in early April 2010. A New York Times report indicated that a deal was close. Union consent was cited as a major hurdle for negotiators to clear. On April 22, 2010, United announced that it would not pursue a merger with US Airways. On May 2, 2010, the boards of directors at Continental and United Airlines approved a stock swap deal that would combine them into the world's largest airline in revenue passenger miles. The new airline will take on United Airlines' name, Continental's logo, and be based in United's hometown of Chicago. The new United is being run by Continental's CEO, Jeffrey Smisk, along with United Airlines CEO, Glenn Tilton, serving as non-executive chairman of the board. The deal received approval from U.S. and European regulators in the summer of 2010. The shareholders of both airlines approved the deal on September 17, 2010. Both airlines had been reporting losses in the recession and expected the merger to generate savings of more than $1 billion a year. In June 2010, Continental announced that it would begin offering non-stop flights from its hub in Houston to Auckland, New Zealand beginning November 16, 2011, subject to government approval. Flights from Houston to Auckland were to be flown using Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft which had been expected to be delivered in August 2011. However, due to an additional delay of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft, Continental decided to postpone the service until 2012. On June 14, 2010, Continental announced that it would launch non-stop flights from its hub in Houston to Lagos, Nigeria beginning November 10, 2011 subject to government approval. Flights were to be originally flown on Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft. Due to an additional delay in delivery of the 787, Continental ended up launching Houston-Lagos flights with Boeing 777-200ER aircraft instead. In July 2010 the Continental-United merger was approved by the European Union. In August, Continental and United Airlines revealed a new logo that was used after the merger was complete. On August 27, 2010, the U.S. Justice Department approved the Continental-United merger. This is partially because United and Continental agreed to lease 18 takeoff and 18 landing slots at Newark Liberty International Airport to Southwest Airlines. On September 17, 2010, Continental shareholders approved the merger deal with United Airlines. Both carriers plan to begin merging operations in 2011 to form the world's biggest carrier and was expected to receive a single operating certificate by 2012. Continental's Air Operators Certificate was retained, while those of United and Continental Micronesia were surrendered. On the other hand, United's Maintenance Certificate remained while Continental's did not. On October 1, 2010, UAL Corporation completed its acquisition of Continental Airlines and changed its name to United Continental Holdings, Incorporated. Although the two airlines remained separate until the operational integration was completed by mid-2012, as of that day both airlines were corporately controlled by the same leadership. On December 22, 2010, Continental Airlines merged operating certificates with Continental Micronesia. All Continental Micronesia flights were then branded and operated by Continental Airlines. On August 27, 2010, U.S. regulators approved the planned merger. UAL and Continental shareholders gave their consent to the deal on September 17, 2010. The transaction is expected to close by October 1, 2010. Both carriers began merging its operations in 2011. On February 17 of that year, United Continental Holdings announced that Economy Plus will be part of the new United Airlines. On March 22, UCH announced that they had plans to offer Wi-Fi service on more than 200 domestic Boeing 737 and 757 aircraft. The airlines attained a single operating certificate from the FAA on November 30, 2011. That day, all Continental flights began to use the United call sign in air traffic control communications. This marked the end of Continental Airlines. There was some public negative reaction to the new United livery among United employees and frequent flyers and fans, with petitions on social networking sites such as Facebook and Twitter to save the pre-merger United Saul Bass logo and livery. Management may have taken note of this negative reaction when it changed the font of the new livery to the current all-caps sans serif font closer to the latest United Airlines font, from the originally proposed title caps serifed font similar to the latest Continental font, though management never publicly provided a reason for this change. A Boeing 777-200 with tail number N794UA was the last aircraft to receive United's blue and white livery. The new United is the second largest airline in terms of fleet size, while Delta Air Lines remains the largest. The combined airline houses a fleet of over 700 aircraft, surpassing American Airlines' 621. There were also 118 aircraft on order, 50 from United, and 68 from Continental. The combined fleet features a mixture of Airbus and Boeing aircraft, Airbus A319s, Airbus A320s, Boeing 737s, Boeing 747-400s, Boeing 757s, Boeing 767s, Boeing 777s, and Boeing 787 Dreamliners with orders of Airbus A350s. At the time of the merger with United, Continental was the fourth largest airline in the U.S. based on passenger miles flown and the fifth largest in total passengers carried. Continental operated flights to destinations throughout the U.S., Canada, Latin America, Europe, and the Asia-Pacific regions. Principal operations were from its four hubs at Newark Liberty International Airport, George Bush Intercontinental Airport, Cleveland Hopkins International Airport and Antonio B. Pat International Airport in Guam. The only Continental hubs to be rebranded are Cleveland Hopkins International Airport and Houston's George Bush Intercontinental Airport. The Newark hub began the rebranding process on October 19, 2011 with all United-operated ticket counters and gates to be rebranded in Phase 1. Phase 2 of rebranding at Newark began in 2012 with Continental ticket counters and gates to be rebranded. On November 30, 2011, Continental officially merged with United and no longer operates as a separate airline. Though the single operating certificate was acquired and all flights use the United call sign, some Continental Airlines flights continued into 2012. On March 3, 2012, Continental's passenger reservation system and frequent flyer program was merged into United. The last Continental Airlines flight taking off was Continental Flight 1267, flying from Phoenix to Cleveland, and arriving into Cleveland as United Flight 1267. United Airlines, Incorporated merged into Continental Airlines, Incorporated, with Continental Airlines, Incorporated being the surviving corporate entity and a wholly owned subsidiary of the UAL Corporation, on March 31, 2013. The name of Continental Airlines, Incorporated was changed to United Airlines, Incorporated. The combined airline serves up to 370 destinations, from the 10 hubs listed below. Antonio B. Pat International Airport, a Euro-Pacific hub, Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, a Euro-Midwest hub, primary regional hub, Denver International Airport, a Euro-Western hub, George Bush Intercontinental Airport, United's largest hub, primary gateway to Latin America. One of two former Continental hubs, Los Angeles International Airport, a Euro-West Coast hub, operating to Hawaii, Asia, Australia, and Europe, Narita International Airport, a Euro-Asian hub, Newark Liberty International Airport, a Euro-East Coast hub, New York area base, and primary gateway to Europe and Asia. It is also one of the former Continental hubs. O'Hare International Airport, a Euro second largest hub, and headquarters of the new airline, San Francisco International Airport, a Euro primary West Coast hub and primary gateway to Asia Pacific, also operating to Europe. Washington Dulles International Airport, a Euro East Coast hub, operating to Europe, the Caribbean, Africa, and the Middle East. Corporate identity, branding. The designer Saul Bass designed the Continental Jetstream logo in the late 1960s. In the 1990s the design agency Lippincott introduced the Globe logo. Before it merged, Continental's livery consisted of a white fuselage, with the globe in blue and gold, and a grey underside. The combined United Airlines adopted the pre-merger Continental Airlines livery and logo following the merger. Slogans: Work hard, fly right, more airline for your money, one airline can make a difference, working to be your choice, up where you belong, the only airline worth flying, we really move our tail for you, if you can't fly Continental, try to have a good trip anyway, the airline that pride built, the proud bird with the golden tail, company affairs, headquarters. At the time of its integration with United Airlines, Continental had its headquarters at 77 West Wacker in the Chicago Loop of Chicago, Illinois. Continental Airlines previously had its headquarters in the Continental Center I building in the Cullen Center complex in downtown Houston. On October 31, 1937, Continental moved its headquarters to Stapleton Airport in Denver, Colorado. Robert F. Six arranged to have the headquarters moved to Denver from El Paso, Texas because Six believed that the airline should have its headquarters in a large city with a potential base of customers. At a 1962 press conference in the office of Mayor of Los Angeles Sam Yorty, Continental Airlines announced that it planned to move its headquarters to Los Angeles in July 1963. In 1963 Continental's headquarters moved to a two-story, $2.3 a million building on the grounds of Los Angeles International Airport in Westchester, Los Angeles, California. The July 2009 Continental magazine issue stated that the move underlined Continental's Western and Pacific orientation. On July 1, 1983 the airline's headquarters were relocated to the America Tower in the Northtown area of Houston, and would remain there until relocation to downtown in 1998. Stephen M. Wolfe, the president of Continental, said that the company moved its headquarters because Houston became the largest hub for Continental. In January 1997 Continental occupied 250,000 square feet of space at the America Tower. In addition it had 200,000 square feet of office space in a building in proximity to George Bush Intercontinental Airport and 75,000 square feet in a building located on Fuqua Road in Houston. The airline planned to move into a new headquarters site. Originally it wanted a single site for its operations. In September 1997 the airline officially announced that it would consolidate its Houston headquarters in Continental Center I. The airline scheduled to move around 3,200 employees in stages beginning in July 1998 and ending in January 1999. The airline consolidated the headquarters operation at the America Tower and three other local operations into Continental Center I and Continental Center II in the Cullen Center. Bob Lanier, mayor of Houston, said that he was tickled to death by the airline's move to relocate to downtown Houston. After the September 11 attacks and by September 2004 Continental laid off 24% of its clerical and management workers. Despite the reduction of the workforce, Continental did not announce any plans to sublease any of his space in Continental Center I and Continental Center II. In 2008 Continental renewed its lease for around 450,000 square feet in Continental Center I. Before the lease renewal, rumors spread stating that the airline would relocate its headquarters to office space around George Bush Intercontinental Airport due to high fuel costs affecting the airline industry. The rumors stated that the airline was studying possibilities of less expensive alternatives to Continental Center I. The parties did not reveal the terms of the lease agreement. In 2010, Continental Airlines and United Airlines announced that they would merge and that the headquarters of the combined company would be in the Chicago Loop in Chicago. The airline has not stated how much of the 480,000 square feet of space that it leases in Continental Center I will be vacated. As of 2010 Continental had around 3,000 clerical and management workers in its downtown Houston offices. According to Nicole Bradford of the Houston Business Journal, some believe that the airline will vacate and leave thousands of square feet of space in downtown Houston empty. As of 2010 Continental leases 450,000 square feet in Continental Center I, about 40% of the tower's office space. United has begun to move employees to a new operations center in the Willis Tower and 1,000 are expected by the end of 2010. As of September 2011 Continental continues to have employees at Continental Center I, which is now a former headquarters. About half of the existing employee base will remain in the building. As of September 2011 Continental continues to occupy space at Continental Center I, now a former headquarters, and another building. Half of the previous number of employees will work in downtown Houston. Some job positions were eliminated. Some employees were transferred to Chicago. Environmental record: Continental Airlines has made efforts to minimize the negative environmental effects of commercial aviation. For example, The carrier invested over $12 billion for the purchase of the current 270 fuel-efficient aircraft and related equipment that make up part of the airline's fleet. These efforts have contributed to significant reductions of greenhouse gas and noise emissions, and have decreased fuel consumption by 45% per mainline revenue passenger mile over the past decade. Continental Airlines was also one of the first carriers in the world to fit winglets to as much of its fleet as it could, reducing fuel burn by 3.5%. Continental has implemented a program that gives passengers the opportunity to offset their carbon emissions per flight for a fee of $2. Funds collected from the carbon offset scheme are directed for tree planting and reforestation areas. Passengers can also contribute $50 or more to fund renewable energy projects such as wind or solar power projects, or to re-establish algae in oceans or large-scale reforestation. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Design for the Environment program has recognized Continental for use of a non-chromium aircraft surface pre-treatment that is environmentally compatible. Continental Airlines is the first carrier in the world to utilize this technology on their aircraft. The product, Pre-Cot, manufactured by Pantheon Enterprises, eliminates hazardous chemicals that are usually used in the pre-treatment phase before painting an aircraft. This technology provides improved environmental conditions for maintenance employees, while also reducing wastewater. Continental Airlines is planning flight tests using aircraft powered by biofuel rather than traditional Jet A1. On January 7, 2009, Continental partnered with GE Aviation to conduct a biofuel demonstration flight, making the airline the first U.S. carrier to conduct tests using biofuels. The test bed, a Boeing 737-800, ran one of its engines on a mix of 50% kerosene, 6% algae, and 44% jatropher, a weed that bears oil-producing seeds. The engine running partly on biofuel burned 46 kg less fuel than the conventional engine in 1.5 hours while producing more thrust using the same volume of fuel. Continental CEO, Larry Kellner, commented, "This is a good step forward, an opportunity to really make a difference to the environment," citing Jatropher's 50–60% lower CO2 emissions as opposed to Jet A1 in its life cycle. Continental Airlines has been recognized by NASA and Fortune magazine for positive environmental contributions. Awards: Number 1 Most Admired Global Airline. Fortune magazine, Number 1 Most Admired U.S. Airline. Fortune magazine, Number 1 Greenest U.S. Airline. Greenopia, Number 1 Pet-Friendly Airline. Petfinder.org, Best Executive Business Class. OAG Airline of the Year Awards, Best Airline based in North America. OAG Airline of the Year Awards, Best U.S. Carrier Transatlantic and Trans-Pacific Business Class. Conda Copyright NAS Traveler, Best Airline for North American Travel. Business Traveler Magazine, Best Large Domestic Airline. Zagat Airline Survey, 2008, Best Value for the Money. Zagat Airline Survey, Highest Ranked Network Airline. J.D. Power & Associates, Airline of the Year. OAG, Business Leadership Recycling Award. American Forest and Paper Association, Destinations. Continental, together with Continental Express and Continental Connection, offered more than 2,400 daily departures throughout the Americas, Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. The summer 2008 schedule saw Continental serving 130 domestic and 132 international destinations. Continental Airlines operated primarily a hub-and-spoke route network with North American hubs in Cleveland, Houston, and Newark, and a West Pacific hub in Guam. The majority of Continental flights were operated from its hubs, with a few exceptions. Some affiliated airlines used the Continental Connection name also operate flights not involving hubs, such as Gulfstream International Airlines, which operated intra-Florida and Florida-Bahamas services. For almost 40 years, Continental operated a very large hub in Denver, Colorado, but took the decision to close that hub in 1995 immediately after the opening of Denver International Airport, which represented a significantly higher cost operation than the former Stapleton Airport, which DIA had replaced. The abrupt nature of this change came as a shock to Denver, which was experiencing dramatic growth. The void left by Continental's departure allowed the establishment of the new Frontier Airlines. Both Frontier and Southwest Airlines have expanded quickly to fill the vacuum created by Continental's closing of its Denver hub. For the first 40 years of its existence, Continental was a domestic airline. However, especially after the incorporation of Texas international routes, it has served more Mexican destinations than any other U.S. carrier since the mid-1980s. Continental first entered the transatlantic market in April 1985, with the introduction of the Houston-London Gatwick service. Long prevented from serving London Heathrow Airport because of the provisions of the Bermuda II Agreement, which only allowed British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, United Airlines and American Airlines to operate flights from Heathrow to the United States, Continental maintained its London services at Gatwick, where in 2007 as many as 6 flights a day were offered to Newark, Houston, and Cleveland. In March 2008, an Open Skies agreement between the U.S. and the European Union became effective, invalidating Bermuda II restrictions that had limited the number of carriers and cities in the U.S. that could serve London Heathrow. In November 2007 Continental announced that new, non-stop, twice-daily service from its hubs at George Bush Intercontinental Airport and Newark Liberty International Airport to London Heathrow would be offered. And this service was inaugurated on March 29, 2008. The service replaced existing frequencies to London Gatwick and are offered with a combination of Boeing 777-200ER and 757-200 equipment, with flat beds guaranteed in the business-first cabin. Continental has grown its presence at London Heathrow to 7 daily flights. 2 to Houston Intercontinental and 5 to Newark. During the Vietnam War, Continental's extensive military charter operations established a presence in the Pacific region that formed the basis for the Air Micronesia operation. Service to Japan was initiated in the 1970s from Guam and Saipan, and by the late 1980s, non-stop service between Seattle and Tokyo was briefly offered with 747 equipment, soon to be replaced with the direct Honolulu-Tokyo flight. Through the 1990s, Continental maintained a minimal presence in the long-haul trans-Pacific market, until the delivery of 777-200ERs in 1998 which saw the addition of non-stop Tokyo service from Houston and Newark. By 2007, Hong Kong and Beijing were added to the network, and in 2009 Shanghai was added, all from the Newark hub. Continental has served Australia in the past with DC-10 and Boeing 747 service from Hawaii. Continental withdrew from much of the Australian market, but continues Air Micronesia Boeing 737 Euro 800 services between Cairns and Guam on a 4x weekly basis. Beginning in June 2011, it initiated service to Hilo, Hawaii, providing that city the only non-stop air service to and from any destination outside the state of Hawaii. Continental offered the most destinations of any of the U.S. carrier to India, Japan, Mexico, Ireland and the United Kingdom, and was the only U.S. airline that flew to the Federated States of Micronesia, Marshall Islands, and Norway. Continental began service from Newark to Mumbai, India on October 1, 2007, making that city Continental's second Indian destination. Code-share agreements. In addition to Continental Express, Continental Connection, and Star Alliance partners, Continental had code-share agreements with the following airlines. The operators of Continental Connection were, CommutAir operated mostly from Continental's Cleveland and Newark hubs. Colgan Air operated out of Cleveland, Houston and Newark. Colgan, as a subsidiary of Pinnacle Airlines Corporation, operated out of Cleveland, Houston, and Newark as Continental Connection. Cape Air operated out of San Juan, Puerto Rico to other Puerto Rican destinations, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, Anguilla and Nevis. It also serviced routes from Guam to Saipan, Saipan to Rota and Rota to Guam. Gulfstream International Airlines operated in the Bahamas, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, Tampa, West Palm Beach, Tallahassee, Pensacola, and Key West. also operated some flights under the Essential Air Service program from Continental's Cleveland hub. Fleet: Continental's all-Boeing fleet consisted of 4 types in 10 variants, with 2 variants of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner scheduled to enter service in 2011. The company's daily aircraft utilization was usually at the top of the industry. As of September 2010, the Continental Airlines fleet consisted of the following aircraft with an average age of 9.5 years. All of the aircraft have been rebranded into the United fleet. All aircraft will be turned into United livery by 2013. First class was offered on domestic flights. Business first is offered on transatlantic trans-Pacific flights. Continental Airlines was one of 3 carriers to sign an exclusivity agreement with Boeing in the late 1990s. When Boeing acquired McDonnell Douglas, the European Union forced Boeing to void the contracts. Both parties had been adhering to the terms under a gentleman's agreement. Continental was one of the first major airlines to fly Boeing 757s on transatlantic routes. There have been some instances of range limitations on westbound transatlantic flights due to strong headwinds resulting in a fuel stop which does not appear on the timetable, but these stops are not common. The use of the 757 with its smaller seating capacity allowed for thin routes to be economically viable. It allowed non-stop service from smaller cities, such as Belfast, Northern Ireland and Hamburg, Germany to the New York Gateway. Previously, customers originating at these and similar cities needed to connect at European gateways like London Heathrow, Paris Charles de Gaulle, or Frankfurt, in order to travel to New York. United retains a number of these flight routes, mostly based out of Newark, including Newark-Hamburg, Newark-Dublin, and Newark-Berlin. It is possible today to differentiate a former Continental Boeing 757 from an original United Boeing 757 as the ex-Continental 757s were fitted with winglets, while United's do not. Historic fleet. Cabin: Continental Airlines had a 2-class service configuration, first business first and economy class, for aircraft in the mainline fleets. Business first: Continental had begun deploying business first seats that allowed customers to lie completely flat, reclining 180 degrees and providing 6A1 or 2 feet of sleeping space in the fully extended position on its 777-200ER and 757-200 aircraft. The flatbed seat offered a seat measuring up to 25 inches wide when the adjustable armrest was positioned flush with the seat cushion. Electronic controls enabled customers to easily move the seats to an infinite combination of seat adjustments, including lumbar support, leg and foot rests. iPod connectivity was available in the flatbed seat. The new business first seats had a 6-way adjustable headrest, an individual overhead reading light and an adjustable seat light allowing customers to read in bed without disturbing their neighbor and a privacy shell that allowed for seclusion from other travelers. Business first customers also received one of the highest crew-to-passenger ratios among all international business class products. The new business first seats were featured on all of Continental's Boeing 777s and Boeing 757 Euro 200s. Installation on the Boeing 767 fleet was to follow in 2011. The anticipated completion of the rollout across Continental's entire international fleet was planned for August 2012. In addition, all 787 deliveries were to have the seats installed. Continental considered Business First to be its signature onboard product, and the service is a frequent subject of advertising campaigns. Customers seated in the Business First cabin on long-haul flights from the United States to Europe, Asia, select cities in South America, and the Middle East received special ground services, including elite access priority bag service at check-in, expedited security screening, access to Continental's President's Club or affiliated Star Alliance lounges, personalized Continental concierge service, and dedicated boarding procedures. On board, multi-course meals were designed by Continental's Congress of Chefs, beverages were selected by Continental's wine masters, and service was provided by flight attendants from separate international crew bases at Newark and Houston. Most flights had at least 2 meal services. Entertainment was offered at each individual seat, and passengers on Boeing 777 and 757 aircraft had access to a new audio-video on-demand system with touch-screen controls. 767 aircraft featured older, looped video multi-channel entertainment systems, generally with a wider programming selection than economy class. 767 aircraft were expected to receive AVOD in the near future. Customers also were provided headphones, a large pillow, wool blanket, and amenity kit prior to departure. Upon arrival, business-first customers have access to shower facilities and arrival lounges at most airports. Continental offered a modified business-first service on flights from the United States mainland to Hawaii. All flights offered the same suite of Elite Access ground services, along with a similar main meal service on board. Amenities such as pillows and headsets also were the same, but no amenity kits were offered. On flights from Newark and Houston to Honolulu, Continental operated Boeing 767-400ER aircraft with typical recliner-style business-first seats. On flights from Los Angeles and Orange County to Honolulu-Kahului with Boeing 737 equipment, domestic first-class seats were substituted. Non-stop flights from Guam to Honolulu were exempt from most of these modifications and more closely resembled the standard business-first service. No complimentary upgrades were offered to Continental One Pass Elite members on any intercontinental flights offering business-first service. However, on 767 operated business-first services to Hawaii, Continental offered a day of departure buy-up fee for any revenue coach class fare, provided seats were available. Mainland Hawaii was the only business-first market where such upgrades are available. In addition, One Pass Elites were eligible for complimentary automatic upgrades on Continental-operated flights from California to Hawaii. Domestic First Class. Domestic First Class was offered on domestic flights. It was available on all Boeing 737 family aircraft, as well as Boeing 757-300 aircraft. Seats range from 20.75 to 21 inches wide, and had between 37 and 38 inches of pitch. Passengers aboard this class received free meals, refreshments, and alcoholic beverages. Passengers could watch movies on overhead television screens located throughout the cabin. In 2009, Continental began to add live TV television and Wi-Fi services to all next-generation Boeing 737s and Boeing 757-300s, which was free of charge to first-class customers. On international flights to Russia, Latin America, the Caribbean, and select cities in South America, Continental's domestic first-class service was rebranded as International Business Class. These customers received access to Continental's President's Club and affiliated Star Alliance lounges on day of departure. Also, meal choices were frequently substituted to reflect the local cuisine of destinations served, especially on flights to Latin America. International Economy Class. Economy class was available on all international flights. Seats range from 17.2 to 17.9 inches wide, and have between 31 and 32 inches of pitch. Passengers aboard this class received free meals, snacks, and non-alcoholic beverages. Alcoholic beverages can be purchased for $6 per drink or one Continental currency coupon per drink. All seats on 757 and 777 equipment are fitted with a VOD touchscreen with a wide-ranging selection of films, games, television shows and music. Domestic Economy Class. Economy class was available on all domestic flights. Seats were 17.2 inches wide, and had between 31 and 32 inches of pitch. Passengers aboard this class received free non-alcoholic refreshments. Alcoholic beverages may be purchased on board. Passengers on all Boeing 737 Euro 700, an 800, a 900, a 900ER, and 757-300 aircraft could watch movies on overhead television screens located throughout the cabin, with headsets available at a charge. In January 2009, Continental began to add live TV television services to all next-generation Boeing 737s and Boeing 757-300s. Live TV would be chargeable for economy class customers. Continental Airlines offered free meals on domestic economy class flights. In March 2010, for economy class passengers on domestic and Canadian flights under 6 hours and on certain flights to and from Latin America, the airline discontinued free meals and began buy-on-board service in the Northern Hemisphere in the fall of 2010. Meal and drink services. Meals were free on business first on all flights. Flights of a duration of over 1 hour within North America and flights to and from resort destinations in the Caribbean and Latin America had meals in first class depending on the meal times that the flights are within. All flights to and from non-resort destinations in the Caribbean and Latin America had free meals in first class, with the exception of certain flights that depart after midnight. Meals in economy class were served on most flights to and from Asia and Europe. Meals were offered in economy class on all flights to and from non-resort destinations in the Caribbean and Latin America, with the exception of some flights departing after midnight. Flights within Asia and the Pacific that were previously operated by Continental Micronesia had free meals and/or snacks offered during mealtimes. Meals were available for purchase on all economy class flights within North America, to from Canada, and to from resort destinations within the Caribbean and Latin America if the flight's duration is over 61 or 2 hours. Towards the end of the airline's life, on most economy class flights within North America, to from Canada, and to from resort destinations within the Caribbean and Latin America, Continental had a buy-on-board service. On those flights between 21 or 2 hours and 61 or 2 hours, snacks were available for purchase, and food for purchase was available on most of those flights that are 31 or 2 to 61 or 2 hours. Originally the airline provided meals free of charge on flights more than 11 or 2 hours. The airline continued doing so after competitors charged for meals. In March 2010 the airline announced that it would switch to buy-on-board for food in fall 2010. The airline said that the absence of free meals would save the airline $35 a million per year, and if half of economy class passengers on the affected flights purchased food, the airline would make an additional $17 a million per year. The airline did not say how the transition to buy-on-board would affect the employment of workers at the subsidiary Chelsea Food Services. Buy-on-board began on October 12, 2010. On March 1, 2011, Continental stopped serving free snacks on domestic flights to coach passengers in order to align itself with the policy of United Airlines. In addition, on that day all flights between Hawaii, Alaska, and the mainland U.S. became buy-on-board flights. Continental Airlines offered free special meal options on certain flights. Special meals include the child, gluten intolerant, Hindu vegetarian, Jain, kosher, Muslim, and vegan options. The airline offered special meals for all classes of service on flights to and between Houston and Argentina, Asia, Brazil, Europe, and Hawaii, and the airline offered special meals for all classes of service on flights between Newark and Asia, Brazil, Europe, and Hawaii. Flights between Newark and India use Hindu vegetarian as a standard meal choice. In addition, special meals were available in first class on flights between Newark and Alaska, California, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. Other routes with special meal service available in first class include Los Angeles to from Honolulu, Los Angeles to from Maui, Orange County to from Honolulu, and Orange County to from Maui. The airline offered soft drinks that are free on all flights. Beer, liqueurs, spirits, and wine were free of charge in business first and business class on all flights, and for a charge in economy class on all flights. On flights within North America and to or from the Caribbean and Latin America, the airline offered specialty beverages for purchase in economy class. In-flight entertainment, Boeing 757 Euro 200 and 777-200ER aircraft included audio-video on demand in every seat back. Boeing 767 family aircraft were equipped with a personal television located in every seat back, using a tape system. On all Boeing 757-200 and Boeing 777-200ER aircraft, all rows were equipped with power ports that do not require special power adapters or cables. Continental Airlines began offering 95 channels of live direct television to all passengers on its domestic fleet beginning in January 2009. Boeing 737-700s, 800s, 900s, and 900ERs and Boeing 757-300s will receive the service. The service became available immediately after a credit card is swiped and confirmed, and could be activated at any point during the flight. Movies started at a set time and cannot be paused, rewound or fast-forwarded. The service was free to first-class passengers and was available for a charge of $6 in the coach cabin. Service could become limited and/or interrupted during descent. On December 16, 2009, Continental Airlines announced that, beginning in the second quarter 2010, see note, it will offer GoGo in-flight internet service on its fleet of 21 Boeing 757-300 aircraft that primarily serve domestic routes. The new GoGo in-flight internet service will provide customers full internet access on their own standard, Wi-Fi-equipped laptop or personal electronic device at speeds similar to wireless mobile broadband services on the ground. Customers will be able to sign up and log in once the aircraft reaches 10,000 feet. The GoGo system, powered by the AirCell network and available in the continental U.S., will be available to customers at a cost from $4.95 and up, based on length of flight. At airport kiosks, Continental Airlines allowed customers to buy Continental currency, a prepaid credit for audio headsets and alcoholic beverages on flights. OnePass. Established in 1987 in cooperation with now-defunct Eastern Airlines, OnePass was the frequent flyer program for Continental Airlines, the Trump Shuttle, Copa Airlines and Copa Airlines Columbia. OnePass offered regular travelers the privilege to obtain free tickets, first-class upgrades on flights, discounted membership for its airport lounge, and other types of rewards. Customers accumulated miles from flight segments they fly or through Continental Airlines partners. OnePass Elite tiers were Silver, Gold, and Platinum Elite, which have benefits such as free upgrades, mileage bonus, priority check-in, priority boarding, and much more. Continental previously had a frequent flyer program prior to OnePass called Travel Bank, which was started not long after American Airlines started its frequent flyer program in 1981 and when most large United States airlines followed, but this was merged with Eastern Airlines' frequent flyer program in 1987 to form OnePass. The name OnePass refers to the ability to accumulate miles on two major airlines, namely Continental and Eastern, in one frequent flyer program. In addition to its Continental Express, Continental Connection and Star Alliance partnerships, Continental had frequent flyer partnerships with the following airlines: Airima, Cape Air, Copa Airlines, EVA Air, Hawaiian Airlines, Island Air. As a result of United Airlines and Continental Airlines merger, on March 3, 2012, OnePass program was phased out and merged into United Mileage Plus program. OnePass stopped accepting new membership applications effective February 29, 2012. The President's Club was the membership airport lounge program of Continental Airlines. Incidents and accidents. The following were major incidents and accidents that have occurred on Continental Airlines mainline aircraft. March 16, 1954, Flight 46, on a flight from Midland, Texas to Kansas City, Missouri suffers vibration just after takeoff and goes into a dive. The flight crew managed to make a wheels-up landing in an open field. May 22, 1962. A passenger intent on having his wife claim money from life insurance planted a bomb on the Flight 11, which departed Chicago unregistered trademark hair, destined for Kansas City Municipal Airport. The bomb exploded, breaking off the aircraft's tail, and the plane crashed on a farm near Unionville, Missouri. All 45 on board died, including the suicide bomber. This aircraft had previously been subject to an attempted hijacking to Cuba, although the hijackers were captured in El Paso, Texas. July 8, 1962, damaged beyond economic repair when the propellers struck the runway shortly after takeoff. A wheels-up landing was made in a wheat field. January 29, 1963, Flight 290 en route from Midland, Texas to Kansas City crashed on approach, near the south end of the runway and burst into flames. April 13, 1973, after bringing Bob and Audrey Six to their Colorado ranch, the Sabreliner crew departed Montrose Regional Airport, for the return flight to Los Angeles. The thrust reverser of the aircraft was deployed in flight shortly after takeoff. The Sabreliner descended from 1,000 feet, struck the ground, and was destroyed. August 15, 1975, Flight 426, bound for Wichita, Kansas, crashed near the departure end of runway shortly after takeoff. The aircraft encountered severe wind shear at an altitude and airspeed which precluded recovery to level flight. The aircraft descended at a rate which could not be overcome even though the aircraft was flown at or near its maximum lift capability throughout the encounter. The wind shear was generated by the outflow from a thunderstorm which was over the aircraft's departure path. All passengers and crew were safely evacuated. The aircraft was a total loss. March 1, 1978, Flight 603 was scheduled to Honolulu, Hawaii from Los Angeles. At takeoff, the DC-10 overran the runway at Los Angeles when the takeoff was aborted as a result of a tire explosion. The resulting overrun resulted in a fire that engulfed the aircraft. The aircraft was a total loss. 2 passengers died when they evacuated the aircraft directly into the fire. July 8, 1987, near collision with the Delta Airlines Lockheed L-1011. Both the Delta and Continental were heading to the U.S. with nearly 600 people total on both aircraft. The Delta flight strayed 60 miles off course during its flight and came within 30 feet of colliding with the 747 as the L-1011 flew under it in Canadian airspace. It was nearly the deadliest aviation accident in history. November 15, 1987, Flight 1713 bound for Boise, Idaho crashed on takeoff during a snowstorm at Stapleton International Airport in Denver, Colorado. February 19, 1996, Flight 1943 landed wheels up on runway 27 at the Houston Intercontinental Airport, Houston, Texas. July 25, 2000, the official investigation found Flight 55 caused the crash of Air France Concorde Flight 4590 in Paris. The Continental jet dropped a strip of titanium alloy from its thrust reverser on the runway during takeoff. When AF 4590 subsequently departed, Concorde's left main landing gear tires struck the strip of metal and were punctured. The tires then exploded and tire rubber fragments penetrated Concorde's wing fuel tanks, starting fires in engines 1 and 2, leading to the crash which killed all aboard and 4 people on the ground. According to the official report on the accident, the strip of metal installed on the Continental jet was made from a different alloy than had been approved by the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration or the engine manufacturer. This led French authorities to undertake a criminal investigation into Continental Airlines, which ended in Continental being fined €200,000 and ordered to pay €1 million to Air France. January 16, 2006, a mechanic standing near a Boeing 737 at El Paso International Airport in Texas was sucked into one of the engines and killed. The mechanic's failure to maintain proper clearance with the engine intake during a jet engine run, and the failure of contract maintenance personnel to follow written procedures and directives contained in the airline's General Maintenance Manual were determined to be the cause. Factors contributing to the accident were the insufficient training provided to the contract mechanics by the airline, and the failure of the airport to disseminate a policy prohibiting ground engine runs above idle power in the terminal area. December 20, 2008, Flight 1404 bound for Houston, pulled left and ran off of the runway during its takeoff roll at Denver International Airport. The cause of the incident is unknown, however the right side of aircraft caught fire once coming to a stop. Of the 115 people on board, 38 sustained injuries, with 2 seriously injured, including the pilot. Incidents: July 1, 1965, Continental Airlines Flight 12 ran off the runway at Kansas City Downtown Airport, landing in heavy rain. All 66 on board survived. October 28, 2006, Continental Flight 1883, a Boeing 757-200 aircraft carrying 160 passengers, landed on a narrow unoccupied taxiway parallel to runway 29 at Newark Liberty International Airport. No one was injured and both pilots were removed from flying status duties pending an investigation. They have since been reinstated. Potentially confusing runway lighting and pilot error were cited in the investigation. In January 2007, a Continental Boeing 757 pilot died en route from Houston to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. The flight was diverted to McAllen, Texas. June 18, 2009, the captain of Continental Airlines Flight 61, a Boeing 777-200ER, en route from Brussels, Belgium, to Newark, New Jersey, died of natural causes during the trip. The airline alerted federal authorities around 10:30 that morning that Flight 61 was being flown by the first officer and relief pilot. The plane with 247 passengers aboard landed safely at Newark Liberty International Airport at about noon EDT. August 3, 2009, Continental Airlines Flight 128, a Boeing 767, made an emergency landing in Miami due to extreme turbulence. This flight was scheduled from Rio de Janeiro to Houston. The plane carried 11 crew members and 168 passengers. At least 26 passengers were injured, including 4 seriously. December 6, 2010, Continental Airlines was found criminally responsible for the disaster to Concorde at Gonesse on July 25, 2000 by a Parisian court and was fined $200,000 and ordered to pay Air France $1 million. Continental mechanic John Taylor was given a 15-month suspended sentence, while another airline operative and 3 French officials were cleared of all charges. The court ruled that the crash resulted from a piece of metal from a Continental jet that was left on the runway. The object punctured a tire on the Concorde and then ruptured a fuel tank. Another Continental employee, Stanley Ford, was found not guilty. On November 29, 2012, a French appeals court overturned that decision, thereby clearing Continental of criminal responsibility. See also: Air transportation in the United States, List of companies of the United States, List of airlines of the United States, List of airports in the United States, Transportation in the United States, United Airlines, Northwest Airlines. References. Further reading: Continental Airlines, Customer Service Manual, 1970 edition. Vieta, Richard H.K. Contrived Competition, Airline Regulation and Deregulation, 1925–1988, The Business History Review, Volume 64, No. 1, Government and Business, ppA 61–108, External links, Official websites, Continental Airlines, flycontinental.com, Continental mobile site, Continental Airlines Cargo, Continental Airlines Vacations, United Continental Merger, OnePass, affiliated websites, coor.com, a employee website, Continental, a in-flight magazine, Continental Airlines, a official YouTube.